Hi guys, good afternoon Philippines. I've just woken up to this incredible news really and brilliant news that the UN and the 47 member states who voted in favour of this recent resolution have recognised the ability for the Philippines to sort out its own backyard. Why do I say this? Of course, nobody doubts there have been some unexplained deaths in the war on drugs. There have been some people who've lost their lives. Take for instance the case of Keon de los Santos. And in the case of Keon de los Santos, it was proven that this was down to corruption and that Keon de los Santos was actually shot in the back apparently by corrupt police. Now the Philippines was able to launch its own investigation and those responsible were brought to justice. I have no doubt there are going to have been other occasions where due to corruption, where due to criminality, where due to criminal gangs, there would sadly have been others who would have lost their lives in the war on drugs. However, the Philippines inherited from a previous administration 4 million Filipinos addicted to drugs, and in this case Shabu. Shabu is a nasty drug, a mind-altering drug that completely changes people's behaviour. They act like animals, they act wild. And this drug had to be dealt with. You know, there's no point the president just saying, please stop taking drugs. You know, the president has a certain style, and his certain style has been proven before. People have said very clearly that when the president is addressing certain audiences, he speaks in a certain way. When he is addressing drug dealers, you know, he has to be angry. When he's addressing criminals, he has to be angry. You know, drug dealers and criminals, they don't listen to soft words. They don't listen to broken promises. All they listen to is threats that if you carry on making our children take drugs, I will kill you. And these stories, these bravados of the president, i.e. somebody was I dealt with this person, I dealt with that person, I shot this person, killed that person. Of these, as the president have now said, he hasn't killed anybody. So to all the opposition, to all those who are bashing the president, who said that the president is a killer, the president is a tyrant or whatsoever, the fact is the president hasn't killed anybody. The state haven't committed any EJKs. For there to be an EJK, it means that it has to be state inspired, in that the president has paid to have somebody killed, or that the government have paid the police to kill anybody. No, that hasn't happened. Yes, there has been corruption, I admit that, and yes, there have been people who've lost their lives. But the good thing is now that the UN and the 47 member states recognise very clearly that the Philippines has its own justice system. The Philippines has a perfectly functioning justice system. So to all of the people who've been calling for a very long time now for the UN to investigate, for the UN to charge the president with these offences or whatever, you know, I say this, the UN have said very, very clearly that they respect the internal arrangements in the Philippines. They consider the Philippine justice system to be perfectly sufficient. So there's two things that need to be said here. Firstly, you know, President Duterte hasn't lied, but sometimes when you are talking to criminals, threats is the only thing they understand. You know, when you sometimes tell a little white lie in order to protect millions of people, I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. And that maybe is the style of the president, because what he considers is his children, the Filipino people, the millions of Filipinos in the Philippines who've now been protected from drugs. The streets are safer at night. No longer are people scared to walk outside their houses at night because of the fear of some drug dealer killing them, or some murder or carjacking. Crimes are down by 50% in many areas. And this is simply because the president is tough. The president was tough when he was in Davao as mayor. The president has used that same style to rule the Philippines. A president who cares, a president who loves his people very much, but a president who will not tolerate corruption, a president who will not tolerate criminality. And this is what the Filipino people needed. And the president has delivered on that. And the thing is now, the UN have basically shown that they respect the president, they respect the Philippines, they respect the Philippine constitution, they respect Philippine domestic policy and domestic laws. Yes, they have urged an investigation into the killings, but that investigation is already taking place. You know, a long time ago now, the Philippines has been investigating these deaths. As I said, in the case of Kion de los Santos, that was investigated by the internal justice system of the Philippines. Why did it need foreign countries? Why did it need the UN to meddle? But thankfully they haven't. Thankfully they haven't adhered to the calls of the naysayers. They haven't adhered to the calls of the critics and all the people spreading fake news about the president, all the people spreading fake news about the Philippines. They haven't listened to those calls. Instead, they've agreed that the Philippines can sort out its own backyard. The Philippines is capable of sorting out its own internal issues. And this was truly historic. Now, I'd like to give my personal thanks to Ambassador Garcia. You know, I actually met him in London before, and he's an incredible diplomat and incredible at what he does. And I know that he's been there in the UN, he's been talking, he's been listening, he's been using his diplomacy. And the Philippines has scored an incredible victory, a really, truly incredible victory. This is an endorsement of the leadership of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. This is an endorsement of his style, in that the Philippines can handle their own affairs. The president is not some kind of tyrant or some kind of killer that goes around killing people. Not at all. The president protects the lives of every single Filipino, as he has done from the first day that he took office. He chooses a style to engage with people. I remember again back to when the president said in his first Christmas message, and to all the drug dealers, the corrupt, the criminals, this is going to be your last Merry Christmas. Of course that was just his style, of course that was just his bravado, of course that's the way that he deals with these people. But this is what's needed. You know, the days of being soft are over. The question is, how did the president inherit 4 million people addicted to drugs? Why was this not dealt with before? But it's President Rodrigo Roa Duterte who has changed things. It's President Rodrigo Roa Duterte who's made the streets safer. For so long now, so many Filipinos have been calling for a better Philippines. For so long now, so many Filipinos have been calling for a change. So many OFWs were scared to go to the Philippines before. But now these same OFWs are celebrating that the Philippines is safer. There are less people addicted to drugs. There are less people committing crime. There is a reduction in crime, and that is a fantastic thing. So finally, to each and every one of these 47 member states, I would say thank you. Thank you for trusting the Philippines. Thank you for trusting the justice system of the country. Thank you for trusting the Philippines to sort out its own backyard, and thank you for not meddling in internal affairs. And to the likes of Rappler and all of those spreading fake news and all of those talking about EJKs and investigating deaths or whatsoever. You know, the fact is, this is the result. This is the ultimate result. The Philippines is able to sort out its own affairs. You know, people can run along to the UN, people can run along and tell stories to the UN, but thankfully the UN has listened to the truth. The UN has considered all the facts, and the UN can see perfectly well that the Philippines is handling its own affairs, and where there have been issues, this has been dealt with by the Philippines itself. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. This is again a historic day. I woke up to this fantastic news that there isn't going to be some massive investigation that human rights groups have been calling on, because there's no need to, because the Philippines has even recognized that there have been unexplained deaths, and the Philippines will deal with this itself through its own internal mechanism. It doesn't need the UN to meddle, and the UN hasn't meddled. The UN has let the Philippines sort out its own affairs, so this is a truly historic day. Thank you so much. God bless President Duterte, God bless the Filipino people, and God bless all of the people behind this historic decision and educating the UN as to the real story in the Philippines. You know, when you are dealing with 4 million people addicted to drugs, when you are shutting down countless drug dens and ridding billions of pesos worth of shabu off the streets, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be situations where people accidentally lose their lives. But not only have people lost their lives, law enforcement officers have lost their lives as well. The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, the police. Let's take a moment to think about all those who've lost their lives, and the families who've basically grieved for loved ones as a result of the war on drugs. But let's also take a moment for all of those who've lost their lives, all those Filipinos who got caught up in maybe in a drug den, and all those people who were accidentally killed. Let's take a moment and let's think about those as well, because that shouldn't have happened, and that will be investigated by the police themselves. So let's take a moment to think about all those who've lost their lives in the war on drugs. It's awful. And no life lost. One life lost is one life too many. But the situation is, let's look at the bigger picture now. The Philippines is now a safer place. 4 million Filipinos have been reduced now to maybe half that, to half of those who are addicted to drugs. So many people have been rehabilitated. So many people have sought treatment. The police, the Philippine government has provided treatment for millions of Filipinos who are addicted to drugs. And as I said, the Philippines is a safer place. Thank you so much for watching. God bless the Philippines. God bless the Filipino people.